Navy officers assumed young woman was someone's girlfriend. Then she showed her call sign was Reaper. The four Navy officers at the bar didn't notice Lieutenant Commander Jessica Kane walk in. Or rather, they noticed her, but not in the way she'd hoped. They saw a young woman in jeans and a simple blouse, hair down, no makeup, and immediately made assumptions about who she was and why she was there. None of those assumptions involved the possibility that she belonged there more than they did. For more powerful videos about our military heroes, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue to tell these important stories. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Kane, 29 years old, walked into the Naval Officers Club at Naval Air Station North Island on a Friday evening. She just finished a brutal week of training exercises and debriefs, and all she wanted was a quiet drink before heading home to her apartment. The Officers Club was one of the few places on base where active duty and retired officers could relax in a semi-formal environment. Jessica had been coming here for 3 years, ever since her first deployment with VFA 154, the Black Knight Squadron. But tonight she wasn't wearing her uniform. She'd changed into civilian clothes, jeans, a navy blue blouse, comfortable shoes. Her long, dark hair, usually tied back in a regulation bun, hung loose past her shoulders. Without her uniform, without the visible markers of her rank and position, she looked like what most people would assume, a young woman in her late 20s, probably someone's girlfriend or wife, maybe looking for her significant other. Jessica had learned over the years that this assumption was both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because sometimes it was nice to be anonymous, to not have people immediately ask about her job or her experiences. A curse because it revealed how many people still couldn't imagine that a woman who looked like her could be a combat pilot. She approached the bar, taking a seat on one of the stools. The bartender, a former Navy enlisted sailor named Rodriguez, who'd worked at the club for 15 years, was helping another customer and hadn't noticed her yet. At a table near the bar, 4 male officers were deep in conversation and drinks. All appeared to be lieutenants or lieutenant commanders, probably in their early to mid-30s. Their uniforms hung on the backs of their chairs. They were active duty, likely stationed at North Island or on one of the carriers based out of San Diego. One of them, a tall officer with close-cropped blonde hair, noticed Jessica and nudged his companion. "Check it out," he said, his voice just loud enough to carry. "New girl. Someone's girlfriend, probably." His friend, a stocky officer with a thick Boston accent, glanced over. "Nice. Think she's waiting for someone? Only one way to find out." The blonde officer replied. He stood up and approached Jessica with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his tone friendly but condescending. "This is actually an officers' club. Are you looking for someone? I can help you find them." Jessica turned to look at him, her expression neutral. "I'm not looking for anyone. I'm here for a drink." The officer's smile flickered slightly. "Oh, well, this club is actually for active duty and retired military officers only. It's kind of exclusive. Are you meeting your husband? Boyfriend?" "I don't have a husband or boyfriend," Jessica replied calmly. "And I know what this club is for. I'm active duty." The officer's eyebrows shot up. You're an officer?" "Yes." He looked genuinely surprised. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. What's your rate? Are you medical? Supply?" Jessica took a slow breath. This was the part she hated, the automatic assumption that, if she was military, she must be in one of the traditional women's roles. Not that there was anything wrong with medical or supply. Those were critical positions that required skill and dedication. But the assumption that those were the only options for a woman in uniform was exhausting. "Neither," she said simply. The officer returned to his table, and Jessica could hear them speculating. "She says she's active duty," the blonde one reported. "Probably a nurse," another officer said. "Or maybe admin, paper pusher." "Could be intel," the Boston accent suggested. "They've got a lot of women in intel now." Jessica ordered her drink from Rodriguez, who'd finally made his way over. "Whiskey, neat, please." Rodriguez nodded, but even he looked slightly surprised. Most of the women who came to the club ordered wine or mixed drinks. Whiskey neat was unusual. From the table, she heard one of the officers laugh. "Whiskey? She's trying too hard. Definitely trying to impress someone." Jessica's jaw tightened slightly, but she didn't respond. She dealt with this her entire career. The assumptions, the doubt, the constant need to prove herself in ways her male colleagues never had to. The blonde officer approached again, emboldened by alcohol and his friend's encouragement. "So seriously, what do you do? What's your designator?" Jessica turned to face him fully. 1,310. There was a beat of silence as the officer processed this. Behind him, his friends had gone quiet too. 1,310 was the designator for naval aviator. "Pilot. You're a pilot?" The officer's tone had shifted from condescending to skeptical. "Yes, like you actually fly aircraft?" "That's generally what pilots do," Jessica replied, her tone dry. One of his friends called out from the table. "What do you fly? Helos? C-2 seconds? Helicopters and cargo aircraft again, the assumption that she couldn't possibly be flying fighters." "No," Jessica said simply. "Well, Fiver." The blonde officer was getting impatient now. "What do you fly?" F-18 Super Hornet. The skepticism on his face was almost comical. "You're a fighter pilot?" "Yes." "Ass. Come on, really? You look like you're 12. "I'm 29, Jessica said calmly. "And I've been flying F-18 seconds for 7 years. Another officer from the table stood up and approached. "Okay, prove it. What squadron, and what's your call sign?" Call signs were sacred in the naval aviation community. They were earned, not chosen, usually through some memorable incident or personality trait. And they were highly personal. Jessica took a sip of her whiskey, considering whether to engage with this. She could just leave. Walk away. Let these officers continue believing whatever they wanted to believe. But something in her decided that tonight she was tired of being invisible, tired of being dismissed, tired of being assumed to be anything except what she actually was. "VFA 154, she said. "Black Knights. And my call sign is Reaper." The reaction was immediate. The officers exchanged glances, and even the blonde one looked uncertain now. "Reaper," he repeated. That's a pretty hardcore call sign for—" He stopped himself, realizing what he'd been about to say. Rodriguez, the bartender, had been listening. His eyes widened. "Wait. That Reaper? From the Vinson?" Jessica nodded slightly. "Holy shit," Rodriguez breathed. "Ma'am, I was on the Carl Vinson during your 2019 deployment. I watched you bring in an F-18 with one engine out during that storm. Everyone on deck thought you were gonna have to ditch. You brought it in like it was a sunny day." The officers' expressions had changed now. Skepticism was giving way to uncertainty and, in some faces, recognition. "You flew off the Vinson?" one of them asked. "2 deployments. 2018 and 2019. What? What was the engine failure incident?" the blonde officer asked, his condescending tone completely gone now. Jessica shrugged slightly. "Bird strike on approach. Lost the right engine at 400 feet. Couldn't punch out too low, over water, night conditions. Only option was to bring it in on one engine. That's impossible, one of the officers said. The approach speed differential is manageable if you know what you're doing. Jessica finished. I compensated with the rudder, kept the nose straight, adjusted power on the working engine, came in, hot but controlled, caught the 3-wire. Wasn't pretty, but the aircraft was salvageable. Rodriguez was grinning now. Ma'am, the entire deck crew was talking about that landing for months. They said it was the best piece of flying they'd ever seen. I was just doing my job, Jessica said quietly. One of the officers, the one with the Boston accent, spoke up, his voice more respectful now. Did you see combat? Real missions? Jessica met his eyes. 147 combat missions across 2 deployments: Syria, Iraq, Yemen, close air support, strike packages, reconnaissance. Yes, I saw real combat. The silence at the table was complete now. There's something else, Rodriguez said quietly. Ma'am, weren't you involved in that SAM incident over Syria in 2019? Jessica's expression tightened slightly. Yes. What SAM incident? The blonde officer asked. Jessica didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to relive it, but Rodriguez had already brought it up, and now everyone was listening. My wingman and I were flying a strike mission over northern Syria. 2 SA-15 surface-to-air missile sites locked onto us. My wingman took evasive action, but the missiles stayed locked on him. His countermeasures weren't deploying properly, system malfunction. She paused, the memory vivid even after 3 years. I positioned myself between him and the launch site, drew the missiles tracking to my aircraft, evaded the first missile with a high G barrel roll. Second missile got closer. I had to deploy all my flares and chaff, drop to 50 feet AGL, fly between 2 buildings to break the lock. Jesus, one of the officers breathed. After the missiles missed, I came back around, marked the launcher with my targeting pod, and dropped a JDAM on it. Launcher was destroyed. My wingman made it home without a scratch. They gave you the Navy Cross for that, Rodriguez said. It wasn't a question. Jessica reached up and pulled her blouse collar aside slightly, revealing a small ribbon bar pinned to the inside Navy Cross, multiple air medals, campaign ribbons. Ma'am, the Boston accent officer said, his voice completely changed now. We owe you an apology. A serious apology. We were completely out of line. You were, Jessica agreed. You saw a young woman in civilian clothes and assumed I was someone's girlfriend, or maybe medical staff, or admin. Because in your minds, someone who looks like me doesn't fly F-18 seconds off carriers, doesn't fly combat missions, doesn't engage enemy air defenses. The blonde officer, who'd been the most condescending, now looked genuinely ashamed. You're right. That's exactly what we thought. And we were wrong. Completely wrong. The problem, Jessica said, her voice firm but not angry, is that you didn't even consider the possibility. You didn't ask what I did. You asked who I was with. You assumed I needed help finding someone, that I didn't belong here on my own merit. Ma'am, for what it's worth, another officer said, can we ask what your rank is? LCDR, Lieutenant Commander. More surprised looks. She was young for that rank. I was fast-tracked after Syria and subsequent deployments, Jessica explained. Also completed my department head tour ahead of schedule. A female voice came from across the bar. LCDR Kane, is that you? Jessica turned to see Commander Sarah Chen, an older female pilot she'd flown with years ago during her first deployment. Commander Chen. Ma'am. Jessica stood, and the 2 women embraced. Commander Chen looked at the four male officers. I see you've met one of the finest pilots in the Pacific Fleet. Jessica here has more combat time than most pilots see in their entire careers. She's also the youngest female pilot to achieve 100 carrier landings. Chen smiled at Jessica. And congratulations, by the way. I heard about your squadron command selection. Jessica smiled. Thank you, ma'am. It's not final yet. Wait, the blonde officer said. You're going to be a CO, a squadron commanding officer? If the board confirms, yes. VFA 113. I'll be taking command in 3 months. The officers were speechless now. Commander Chen addressed them directly. You, gentlemen, should buy her a drink. It's not every day you meet a future CAG. CAG Commander. Air Group was one of the highest positions a naval aviator could achieve. The blonde officer stood. Ma'am, please, let us buy you a drink. And we'd like to apologize properly. We were way out of line. Jessica considered this. I'll accept your apology on one condition. Anything. Ma'am. Next time you see a woman in a military space in uniform or out, don't assume she's someone's girlfriend or wife. Don't assume she's medical or admin. Ask her what she does. Treat her the way you'd treat a male officer walking in here, because she earned her rank the same way you did. Maybe worked even harder for it. The officers nodded, the lesson clearly received. And one more thing, Jessica added. That whiskey you guys were laughing about me ordering? I drink it because my old CO taught me that if you're going to drink something that reminds you to stay sharp. Whiskey neat means no sugar, no mixers, nothing to hide behind, just the raw taste. Keeps you honest, she raised her glass, to staying honest, and to not underestimating people based on how they look. The officers raised their glasses, properly chastened and genuinely respectful now. Over the next hour, Jessica ended up sharing stories with them not to show off, but to teach. She talked about the challenges of carrier landings, the intensity of combat missions, the brotherhood and sisterhood of naval aviation. She also talked about the barriers she'd faced, the instructors who doubted her, the fellow pilots who'd assumed she'd gotten her position through quotas rather than skill, the constant need to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. But you know what kept me going, Jessica said, knowing that every time I proved someone wrong, I was making it easier for the next woman. Every successful mission, every perfect landing, every time I outperformed expectations, that was one more brick in the foundation for the women who come after me. As the evening wound down, the blonde officer, whose name was Lieutenant Marcus Webb, approached Jessica one last time. Ma'am, I just want to say thank you, not just for your service, but for teaching us something important tonight. I have a daughter. She's only 6, but she loves planes. She wants to be a pilot someday, and tonight you reminded me that I need to raise her believing that she can be anything, including the pilot who shows up at a bar and schools a bunch of cocky officers who underestimated her. Jessica smiled. Your daughter can be anything she wants, Lieutenant. Just make sure she knows that. And make sure the men around her know it too. As Jessica left the officers' club that night, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, slowly, things were changing. That maybe the next generation of female pilots wouldn't have to fight quite as hard to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. She walked to her car, her mind already shifting to tomorrow's flight schedule. There were training exercises to plan, briefs to prepare, and a squadron to get ready to command. Because that's what pilots did. They flew, they led, they proved themselves not through words but through actions, and Lieutenant Commander Jessica Kane had plenty of flying left to do. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked? Have you ever had to prove yourself to people who doubted you? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that real skill and courage come in all forms, hit that subscribe button because everyone deserves to be seen for what they can do, not what they look like. And sometimes the most dangerous pilot in the room is the one you underestimated.